Hello, I'm the Angry Spork. I don't consider myself the most romantic person. Relationships in comics don't interest me all that much because I can either tell the characters are going to end up together or they have absolutely no chemistry, despite what certain other fans would desperately want to be there.
The shipper, able to detect romantic connections where clearly none exist.
C-3PO and Chewbacca are definitely a couple.
But for this St. Valentine's Day, I thought I'd make another collector's issue edition of a list of things that I enjoy. Episodes of comic-based animation.
Moron!
Now, I'll grant that many of the episodes on this list don't shift the paradigm or make drastic changes to the overall series, but I like them for standing out for one reason or another. And while this isn't really a worst to best list, I have placed them in a certain order to which I like more than others. With that out of the way, let's continue with this collector's edition of Valentine's Day 2023. Comic book cartoon show episodes I love. Number 10. Spider-Man 94, The Mutant Agenda and Mutant's Revenge. After getting some bad news from Dr. Kirk Connors that he might be mutating into something inhuman, Spider-Man swings on over to a certain Westchester mansion to get some advice from Charles Xavier, but he trips the security system, gets himself shackled, and comes face to face with the X-Men. The pneumatic arm that traps him and the slide he goes through is more something you'd see in the Spider-Man series than the X-Men's cartoon. Also, I imagine that'd be really painful for someone that didn't have super strength.
Tell us, why are you here?
None of your business.
None of their business? Dude, you didn't exactly knock on the front door. You were creeping around private property. And you refused to explain yourself even after Rogue flirted with you?
You seem kind of cute in a creepy sort of way. Maybe y'all will tell me what you're up to,
Does Peter Parker really have bad luck, or is he just a moron? I can be creepy too if I wanted! Anyway, Professor X can't really do anything for Spider-Man, and he leaves in a huff, through some reused animation. But a sympathetic Beast, having struggled with mutancy in his own life, suggests the webhead check out the recent findings of an old colleague of his, Herbert Landon, who, unfortunately, is not only working for the Kingpin to create super mutants for him to control, but is also being blackmailed by the Hobgoblin. Because his real plan is to use science goo to kill all mutants entirely.
The human race will be purified once more.
Did no one look at this guy's resume on Indeed? Well, I certainly enjoyed the show as a kid. As I got older, the blend of CGI and cel animation, while rather revolutionary at the time, didn't age so great. As well as how safe the show had to be for the censors. Spider-Man can't punch anyone, no uses of words like kill or death, hasn't really aged as well for me. But Christopher Daniel Barnes still did a great job as Spider-Man. There's a lot of good humor.
Power of lightning, strike again!
Power of web shooters. Get real sticky.
We get some good fight scenes, and it's still pretty fun that they got the X-Men voice cast to reprise their roles, implying a shared universe between the two shows, which, at the time, was not as common as it is now. Though I will say that if I had to choose between the two, I much prefer the X-Men and the X-Men animated series designs. Not that the Spider-Man series does them poorly, just a few choices I personally don't care for. Could that be why it's at the bottom of the list? I'll never tell. Number 9. The Batman Artifacts. Largely set in a future world of advanced technology, a couple of archaeologists stumble upon the Batcave, looking for a little assistance because an old foe from Batman's later years has resurfaced. I really liked the juxtaposition of the estimations, suppositions, and outright incorrectness of these scientists as they try to discern what these items in the cave meant, who used what. A few things got lost or confused over time. Certainly nothing we can relate to in these days, right? Right? I consider this a fairly overlooked series. It made drastic changes to various characters, both in design and origins, but none of them felt wrong or hackneyed or dumbed down in any way. They were changes done very well for an adaptation, and it showed not only could they deviate in certain ways from the source material, they could also explore original stories with these versions just as well. Though admittedly, this episode does take a lot of cues from
The Dark Knight Returns.
Hey, I was just gonna say that. Aside from also being 20 years in the future, there are a lot of elements in this episode that do kind of seem like they echo that original Frank Miller story. Batman's a bit grumpier, he shows visible delight in intimidating his opponents, and then there's this line.
Thanks for the ice pack, Freeze. All you did was numb the pain.
It does seem like something Frank Miller would write, at least that wouldn't count among those that are more questionable, let's say. As I noticed as I was putting this list together, this episode was written by Greg Weisman, so no wonder it's this good. Overall, this is one of those possible future storylines for this series' own continuity that not only has a lot of good action, but shows just how far a prepared Batman will go. At least in ways that don't stretch the willing suspension of disbelief too much. Number 8. Justice League Unlimited Patriot Act. General Wade Eiling still doesn't trust the Justice League. Since Cadmus was decommissioned, he's more or less become a pencil pusher, and with the League having an additional Earth base, he still suspects they could be a threat, even though Amanda Waller, not liking the League either, is able to work with them.
It's a different world, General. Learn to live in it.
Because that would make too much sense, he instead decides to look into Project Captain Nazi, which involved a superhuman serum, not to be confused with super soldier serum, that Uncle Adolf's goons were trying to use to enhance their soldiers, but the apparently only sample was taken by Spy Smasher. So he busts into a secret lab, takes the serum, and mutates into a discount Incredible Hulk with tusks. So what does he do with this immense power? He travels time zones, apparently, going from night to day to interrupt a parade celebrating superheroes. He wanted to take on the likes of Superman, but the heavier hitters were busy with a big mission, so the parade was attended by leaguers that even the audience thought were more obscure. Green Arrow, Stargirl, Stripe, Shining Knight, and Vigilante.
No, his proper duty is to his police captain. I see why they call him Dirty. He besmirches his order.
Sir Justin, if you want to be watching stuff on my big TV with the 5.1 surround sound, you had best watch what you say about Mr. Clint Eastwood.
There's only one missed opportunity in this series, is that we did not get more of the fun banter between the modern-day cowboy and the time-displaced knight. What makes this episode so good isn't just that these lesser-known heroes who rely mostly on some form of gear, whether it be magic or technology, can still hold their own against such massive threats, but they never lose sight of the necessity to protect the people. The ones Eiling thought he was protecting, and that had also kind of scoffed at the heroes, which also includes latchkey kids that can operate wrecking balls. And on some level you can kind of understand where Eiling is coming from. That the League have so many powerful people and it could easily turn against the United States or the world. I particularly liked when Sir Justin lectured him about honor and duty, and when those citizens, including a very stubborn grandma, made Eiling realize he'd become what he thought he was fighting. Though he doesn't go complete monster, which I think is a nice touch.
Don't kill me!
I wouldn't kill you, soldier. You're just doing your job.
Another nice touch was that the people themselves started to appreciate these heroes too, even if they weren't the most marketable. And I always liked it when these shows that usually focus on a certain set of main characters take time to give a spotlight to lesser-known ones that deserve a little attention too. Number 7. The Batman, A Family Matter. The formal introduction of Dick Grayson into this series canon. They do largely adhere to his classic origin, circus performer whose parents were killed by Boss Zuko.
I'd like to think I'm here to help you, John.
I'm not sure I understand why we would need your protection.
That's right, John Grayson and Zuko are respectively played by Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill, which is just delightful in every way.
I come from circus folk myself.
I can't tell if that was supposed to be a reference to the whole Joker thing, but moving on. A few details do get changed, but they're by no means bad. In fact, some of them actually enhance the origin, in particular why he goes by Robin. In this universe, his mom made him a new acrobatic suit that the public never got to see, with his initial on it, meaning the R actually stands for Richard, and she likens him to a bird, which he at first thinks is lame. However, after losing his parents, finding out who Batman is, and going on a quest for revenge, he cherishes both the title and the suit which he wears as his crime-fighting gear. In a way, his parents will always be with him.
How about Robin?
Like the bird?
It's a family name.
All in all, for a show that had to arguably play it safer than its predecessor, this show not only got dark, but made a character's origin even more emotionally resonating. Job well done by everyone involved. Number 6. X-Men the Animated Series, Nightcrawler. Rogue, Wolverine, and Gambit vacation in a German ski resort, which the Knucklehead finds a little stifling. But when he hears that there may be a demon nearby, he decides their vacation is going to involve hunting it down. Unfortunately, their trek gets derailed by Gambit's less than skillful skiing.
Man doesn't break a sweat against Apocalypse or Magneto. So what nails him? A pine tree.
Wolverine got the most attractive and therefore most important character out of harm's way. He's the real hero here. They get caught in an avalanche, and Wolverine is the only one conscious enough to get them to a nearby monastery. It's there that they meet this alleged demon, our old pal Nightcrawler. While he was spotted in the town and mistaken for a demon, that's largely because they're not really aware of what mutants are in this place. I'm guessing it's some manner of time loop that keeps them all trapped in the 1800s, and yet they still have laser weaponry. Now, what I enjoy about this, it's the very respectful way they show Nightcrawler's religiosity. They don't have him hammer it into anyone's face. He's angry at the world for how he's been treated. He's frustrated and upset, but he doesn't take it out on other people. He offers his faith as a way to comfort a struggling Wolverine. He opens the door and gives Logan the chance to walk through it or not. And watching it now as an adult, it's actually even better. Our boy Kurt's dropping so many very real, very true statements. This episode ought to be taught in theological classes.
What kind of God would let men do this to me?
Our ability to understand God's purpose is limited, but we take comfort in the fact that His love is limitless.
God gave up on us a long time ago.
No, my friend. God does not give up on His children, human or mutant.
Themes of forgiveness when you've been betrayed. Someone being strong in faith but still struggling with it at times. And, for those like Brother Reinhardt, finding out that despite being an alleged man of God, he's still capable of sin, and having to come to terms with that. And what helps set this up and sell it all so well is Nightcrawler's introduction. He's skulking in the shadows around town, for some unexplained reason, people reacting with fear to something that looks like a demon, only for the revelation at the end of this first scene that he's actually a troubled soul himself. And for people who aren't particularly religious, they might have conflicted feelings about Wolverine finding even a little solace in the good book, and we do end up having to take Nightcrawler's word for it that the townspeople are okay with him.
The townspeople no longer look at me with fear in their hearts.
Yeah, they don't look at you with fear because they're not looking at you at all, dude. And while they don't specify that these monks are Catholic, it is clear that it is of a Christian denomination, and the show is very respectful overall.
Would you be kind enough to accept something more appropriate to wear during your stay?
Don't want to make the natives restless.
Wonder how the monk would have reacted to this particular shot of Gambit stepping out of the snow. I'd call that proof that God exists. And since I pointed out Spider-Man's CGI cell animation combo earlier, I feel it's only fair to point out that there's a shot where a fire breaks out, and the odd choice of overlaying it with footage of an actual fire. It's weird, but in a different way. So yeah, there are a lot of personal reasons why I like this episode so much. It shows someone who's committed to his faith in a believable, real way, more than just wearing a necklace of some kind, or amateur preaching, and doesn't become some kind of straw man for some irritated jackwagon who doesn't agree. It covers serious subjects like God and faith, showing some dissent in Wolverine and to a degree Gambit, but it never condescends to its audience.
Would it hurt so much to see the world through different eyes?
Not to mention, Nightcrawler also saves Rogue, so he's the real hero here. 2. Number 5. Spectacular Spider-Man Intervention. The penultimate episode of the first season, it sees Peter Parker still using the black symbiote suit, subtly succumbing to its takeover of his body. The symbiote even takes advantage of the fact that Aunt May is in the hospital to cause Peter to lash out at his friends who are only trying to help.
Yeah, well, unless my friends are prepared to pony up some cash, they can keep their help and their sympathy.
So that he'll have no other choice but to rely on the symbiote and make some very unsavory decisions. Before long, he's downvoting and leaving negative comments on YouTube videos he didn't actually watch. We see for the first time in the series how he got his powers and how he lost Uncle Ben, and it's the memory, or if you will, spirit of Uncle Ben that helps Peter fight back. The unclouded truth of the people around him who genuinely care, that have always had his back, while the symbiote only takes and takes. Though I think he might be subconsciously overstating how much Black Cat cares about him if she makes it into this montage, and I think she's several years older than he is. Though, if you pay close enough attention, you'll see that the montage literally begins and ends with Gwen. So, while it's a scene we've seen before, Parker rejecting the symbiote, especially in the bell tower of a church, it fits nicely into the show's overall themes of growing pains and young people having to make difficult decisions as they enter adulthood. I even thought it was great that Flash Thompson, of all people, was an integral part of getting Peter to realize something was wrong with him.
A guy who can't even see when his friends are trying to help.
And no one in real life can use "I got possessed by an alien symbiote" as an excuse, though I'm sure eventually someone will try. Number 4. Batman the Brave and the Bold, The Chill of the Night. This series was largely what you'd call a love letter to the Silver Age of comics, where stories were a lot more lighthearted and maybe not taken quite as seriously. However, this episode was by far the darkest in the series, and written by Paul Dini. No fewer than 4 on-screen deaths as Batman finally tracks down the man who killed his parents in front of him, all while the Phantom Stranger and the Spectre, respectively voiced by Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill, are debating about what kind of choices Batman will make. For so long, he's dealt out justice to other people he didn't know, people he had little to no connection to, stopping these insane villains with incredible abilities. But now he's faced with something far more personal, something that digs right at the core of him. Will he maintain his ethical code? Is there a chance he'll abandon everything he's fought for and represents? Similar to what I said earlier about shows veering away from the main characters to focus on the supporting cast, this episode deviated from the show's usual silly, campy atmosphere. It was moody and dark, and even though it may have been safe enough for the censors to give the A-OK, it's definitely one of the better representations of Batman's origin, even though we've seen it thousands of times. And it's a reminder that Dietrich Bader, even though he's played some characters of less than average intelligence, he gave a great performance when Bruce finally confronts the Wayne's killer. For the rest of the series, he's a fairly public hero that, yeah, criminals are threatened by, mostly because he gets in their way. But here, he's someone they genuinely fear. And Hamill makes for a particularly spooky Spectre.
I wouldn't know anything about that.
And even the show itself would later mention how this deviated from its overall tone, and kind of even might have blamed it for its own cancellation. But hey, who said Batmite was a reliable narrator? Number 3. Teen Titans Haunted. Another show that was known to be more comical and light-hearted in its blend of action and drama, that did take a darker turn for this episode. Even though the team's nemesis Slade seems to be gone for good, Robin is still looking for him because he's not entirely convinced he's gone.
We can't be sure. He was never captured, never found.
And it seems his suspicions, or outright paranoia, have been validated when he actually sees Slade, chases him, and the villain reveals he's set seismic weapons to detonate at 3 points within the city. Unfortunately, Robin's the only one seeing Slade, and his obsession becomes outright self-destructive when his team finds him fighting absolutely no one and losing.
I fought him! You think I did this to myself?
Robin, maybe now's not the time, but maybe you mistook what shadowboxing is. He even threatens his friends, which is a step too far, and they have to subdue their leader and find out what's wrong. The episode has a nice spooky feel to it overall. The Titans are genuinely scared and hurt by the mental collapse of someone they considered a friend. Slade had been an ongoing threat for so long that Robin can't seem to imagine a world where he's finally gone.
I don't get it. The dude fell into a pit of lava. Who lives through something like that?
This cyborg apparently hasn't read DC Comics in the last 30 years. Written by Adam Beechin, the episode does a good job of even making the viewer question if Slade is really there, or if there's some other explanation, or if Robin's finally just gone cuckoo banana nutters. And there's a very subtle brilliance in him fighting Slade. To his friends, he's fighting no one and stumbling around, but to him, Slade's just too fast, dodging all his attacks and causing him to stumble and get injured. And his exhausted, paranoid mind is just filling in the gaps to continue the fantasy. But the Boy Wonder does finally come to terms with the fact that he is fighting a ghost. He accepts that his enemy is gone, and at this moment, the problem is in his head, with assistance from Raven, using her psionic abilities in ways we hadn't previously seen. But they do end on an ominous note, that while Robin was literally fighting no one except his own mind, someone did kind of cause that to happen, and the series never follows up on who or what that was. Well, this Robin is Dick Grayson, so my guess is Dan DiDio? Number 2. X-Men Bloodlines. It's Halloween, and the X-Men get a surprise visitor, all the way from Germany.
Nightcrawler.
The Xavier School passes out full bars, and boy did word get around. He got a letter from his birth mother indicating that she's in danger and needs Nightcrawler to come see her alone. This is kind of outside the monk's purview, so he seeks help from the X-Men. Rogue and Wolverine join him again, with Jubilee in tow.
I just realized, Kurt looks a lot like Beast. I wonder if they're related.
Is that racist?
Yes.
A little bit. No.
Ha! Girl, that's about as likely as Nightcrawler and me being kin.
Get it? Huh? Get it? Get it? They arrive at a dam which turns out to be a front for the Friends of Humanity, stocking up weapons for an upcoming war. And as any comic reader would expect, Mystique shows herself, revealing to be Kurt's biological mother, making Rogue an adopted sister, and of course there's the other child Mystique gave birth to, Graydon Creed. A previous episode had revealed that he was the son of Sabretooth, and it did put him on the outs with the FOH, even though he's the founder. He apparently spent time in a mental hospital to deal with the trauma of this revelation, but the only way to get back into his organization was to deal with the other mutants in his family tree. So he convinced Mystique to give up Nightcrawler so that he would leave her, and subsequently Rogue, alone. But mostly Mystique herself.
Nothing more touching than a mother's love.
Now, call it cheating if you must, but this makes the list for many of the same reasons as Nightcrawler's first appearance. There's definitely a theological aspect to it, but what goes on in this episode hits a lot closer to home for our fuzzy elf. The monastery provided him an ecclesiastic family to belong to, but this was the woman that gave birth to him, and now he finds he has an adopted sister and a biological brother. A man like Kurt wants to embrace them and make peace where there is otherwise conflict. He wants to understand why he was abandoned, and when he thinks his mom is in danger, he wants to protect her. There's really good thematic setup on the plane ride. In this series, Jubilee never knew her biological parents, and expresses frustration at how she was bounced from one foster home to another, never feeling like she belonged, and that's something that Kurt can identify with. And of course, he gives her wisdom that he's developed over years of being a man of God.
But every day, I pray for the Lord to forgive my sins, and to forgive the sins of others, even those who have done harm to me.
I don't think I could do that.
That is why I look to God for help, because we cannot do it by ourselves.
But then he faces harsh reality when he has a confrontation of his own. His own brother wants to kill him, their mom, and their sister. He wants to destroy all mutants, and his mother reveals that he was an inconvenience, born with his mutancy on full display, ruining the privileged life she'd married into. It clearly affects him. He doesn't want to hurt anyone, but he has to defend himself. He's all about forgiveness, but he's still human, and it's something he admits he has to struggle with. The episode doesn't merely have Nightcrawler talking the talk when it comes to his faith, it shows him walking the walk. Or teleporting the teleport? Now I'm confused. It's really a beautiful scene after Mystique reveals the truth about his birth and why she gave him up. She assumes he's going to hate her, because hate is something she's dealt with her entire life. Being hated by someone is something she can handle. Being loved by someone is something she can exploit. But to be forgiven, to admit that something she did, even if it was to survive, may have been wrong, that someone can forgive something so terrible, that's probably not something she's used to.
This religion stuff is intense.
Which may have been what caused her to push Kurt out of the way of an attack from Graydon and seeming to sacrifice herself. But don't worry, she's fine. She later walks out of the water 5 feet away from the X-Men, and Wolverine, the guy with enhanced senses, somehow doesn't notice. Bloodlines is an episode that's great for the struggle it gives Nightcrawler, possible redemption for Mystique, and a great closer when the Friends of Humanity Council decide to let Graydon deal with the one family member he wasn't so keen to confront.
Come to Papa.
This episode has a lot in common with Nightcrawler, but it's not so much copying it as it is rhyming, to borrow an axiom from George Lucas. Number 1. Batman the Animated Series almost got him. Highly regarded by many fans of the series, it sees a handful of Batman's adversaries laying low in a bar, playing poker and exchanging stories of how each of them almost ended the Dark Knight. I find it hard for me to say something that hasn't been said by other content creators, with Batman's involvement largely being in the flashbacks themselves. We get distinct focus on various villains, great stories from each one of them, wonderful performances by their voice actors, and a wonderfully subversive twist by the Joker towards the end. Something that even disturbs his fellow criminals. The animation is among its best, has great vibe and atmosphere, excellent humor.
Half of me wants to strangle you.
And what does the other half want?
To hit you with a truck.
We used to date.
These characters are not really friends. They can get along under the right circumstances, they can work together, but if any of them saw the opportunity to get the upper hand on the other, they'd probably take it. And yet, despite their rivalry and disagreements and sometimes outright hatred of each other, they can still have a friendly moment to sit down, share some stories about their shared adversary, and part on, well, as good a terms as you're going to get with this group. All around, there's just not much bad you can say about this episode. I mean, unless you want to get nitpicky and question if these guys getting hit by the giant penny would survive. I'm even hesitant to get into the specifics of why it's so good, because I don't want to spoil it for anyone who might have not already seen the episode, which you should totally go and do. If only to see for yourself just how much Batman enjoys operating a forklift. Maybe if the Waynes had survived, that's what he'd be doing for a living. And if I hadn't put this episode at number 1, I probably would have been mobbed by the internet. Now imagine what would have happened if I didn't put it on the list at all. That does it for this collector's issue, which, by the way, was completely unscripted, a decision that probably made it 2 or 3 times longer to make than it could have. But that's on me. Happy Valentine's Day, everyone! I'm the Angry Spork, and man, have I got issues.